The Constitutional Convention. Here we are, after the leading Americans have decided that Shays' Rebellion was a big enough of a deal for them to say that the Articles of Confederation were too weak for the nation to survive under. They became very scared by the idea of popular unrest by the people. Remember that not every American believed that Shays' Rebellion was a big deal. Thomas Jefferson disagreed wholeheartedly and said that we need a rebellion every 20 years or so to keep leaders in their place. And even some historians like Howard Zinn would say that the Founding Fathers, who will be sitting at the convention, just as this artist is depicting the Founding Fathers at the Constitutional Convention, that in fact they went to rewrite the Articles to protect their own interests. And by that I mean their own wealth interests, property. They were fearful of their property being taken by the poor. So there's many interpretations to it. Regardless of whose interpretation is right, what we do know is that these men did meet in Philadelphia to rewrite the Articles and to give us the Constitution we have today. So going into that, we have some objectives and essential questions I want to go over before we begin. The objective, we've had this one for a while, explain why the Articles of Confederation failed, and specifically here, and the compromises made to establish the Constitution. We're going to be looking at several things, including representation, slavery, and tariffs. Some major compromises made at the Constitutional Convention that were important to the Founding Fathers. And the essential questions: why was compromise necessary when writing the U.S. Constitution? And how was the issue of representation in Congress between the small and large states resolved during the Constitutional Convention? That last question is very important. They are all important, but this one is specific to the notes that you have in front of you. In fact, at the top where it says question or problem, that last question is the one that you will be taking notes on. You will be able to answer with your notes. Vocabulary here: compromise, before we begin, is an agreement or a settlement of a disagreement that is reached by each side giving up part of what they want. So compromise is not me giving up all of what I want for someone to do what they want, but it's taking both ideas that I and another party have and coming to a middle ground. Something that we like to see in government. We haven't seen a lot of that lately, but you'll see how it is used here in the Constitutional Convention. So a little background before you begin taking notes. Under the Articles, remember that all states had one vote in Congress. There was only Congress. There was no president or judicial branch. 9 of the 13 states had to agree to pass a law. The federal laws did not have to be followed by the states. The federal government essentially had no power to enforce its laws, so it's kind of pointless. And there were some major economic problems. States printed their own money, as well as taxed goods shipped in from other states, and that pretty much killed trade. Having different currencies is a nightmare. We talked about that in class. So let's see how they address one of the issues that comes across in the convention. So this is where your notes begin. So the goal of the convention was first and foremost to only revise the Articles of Confederation, not to get rid of, but to revise. As the Founding Fathers met there, though, they realized that the Articles of Confederation would not work at all. In fact, too many things had to be changed, and so in the end, they decided to completely throw the Articles of Confederation out the window and start on a new blank canvas. And that leads us into our first conflict. And this is the conflict over how states will be represented in the new government. Oh, and mention the delegates here are typically known as men of ability, weight, and experience. These men were all wealthy, upper-class individuals. Most of them were college-educated. At least half of them owned slaves. So, that's some evidence towards Howard Zinn's argument about writing a constitution to benefit themselves. Will we ever know? I'm not sure, but just keep in mind, these are the individuals writing this constitution, 55 men and the upper class. In fact, Alexander Hamilton, a man that we'll talk about later, he's a person that said that no decisions should be left in the hands of the regular person because they are too rash to make decisions and can't think it through. So keep that in mind. So, state representation in Congress. The first disagreement that came up was between large and small states. You'll notice down here at the bottom I have a bar graph that shows the population of all of the 13 states in 1790. This is roughly when the Articles of Confederation, the Constitutional Compromises, the Convention was occurring. And so you notice that there's a wide range. There are some states that have a lot of population: Virginia, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and there are small states that don't even compare to the large ones, like Rhode Island, Georgia, Delaware, New Hampshire, New Jersey. They're all over the place. And there's two ideas about representation. There's proportional representation, and in proportional representation, the number of votes is based on the population. So the more population you have, the more votes you have. And then there's the idea of equal representation. Equal representation is exactly what it says. Each state gets the same number of votes. No matter how big your population is, each state gets the same number of votes. And these ideas will butt heads in the convention here. The first plan of government that is introduced is the Virginia Plan. The Virginia Plan first addresses the issue that they need more of a division of the powers in government. And so they decided to create three branches of government: Congress, executive, president, and judicial. The issue that comes up, though, is how the states will be represented in Congress. And to address this, in the Virginia Plan, they come up with a two-house Congress. So two separate houses. And you notice this image I have down here where it says U.S. Congress. We have the House of Representatives and the Senate. And that's exactly how it was divided up. There was two separate entities that made up the entire U.S. Congress. Both houses, however, both the Senate and the House of Representatives, would be based on proportional representation. That means that the population of the states would equal the number of votes in both houses. Now, this makes a lot of sense, considering the name of this is the Virginia Plan. This plan did originate from two delegates, James Madison and Edmund Randolph from Virginia, and this benefits their state. They have the largest population of all the 13 states, so why wouldn't they want the number of votes for representation in Congress to be based on population? Well, I'm sure you're already guessing. This makes many of the small states very upset. And they developed their own plan, and that is the New Jersey Plan. In the New Jersey Plan, it called for a one-house Congress, not two, but one, and it called for equal representation for each state, meaning each state got one vote. So just like the Articles of Confederation, there would be 13 votes, and each state got one. Makes a lot of sense for a state like New Jersey, who has a very small population compared to states like Pennsylvania and Virginia. They didn't want to be outvoted. What I want you to do is to take your notes right now and read these two questions. What is the difference between proportional and equal representation? And how do the Virginia and New Jersey plans call for representing the states in Congress? And answer those questions using your notes so far. So to review here, the Virginia versus the New Jersey plans. Both of these plans called for three branches of government: Congress, executive, and judicial, and they both wanted a stronger national government. However, the differences were in Congress itself. The Virginia plan called for two houses of Congress. The New Jersey plan called for one house of Congress. The Virginia plan wanted to base its representation on proportional representation, meaning that the greater population, the more votes, and the New Jersey plan wanted every state to have the same number of votes. So they're obviously biased towards their home states. But there was a compromise struck between these two plans to resolve this issue of representation, and that is known as the Great Compromise. The Great Compromise called for two houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and Senate. So there you go from the Virginia plan. And the difference here is in the House of Representatives, the representation for the states will be based on population of the state. So the more population, the more votes in the House of Representatives. The Senate would be based on equal representation. Each state would get 2 votes. So there is a balance between the large and the big states through the Great Compromise. Virginia plan got some of what it wanted, and the New Jersey plan got some of what it wanted. And this visual kind of shows that. Shows how the Virginia plan broke down Congress, and both the New Jersey plan, and it's showing you here how each one had a part coming from it. So Virginia Plan having two House Congress with the proportional representation, and the New Jersey Plan did get its equal representation in one of the houses of Congress. And this is exactly how it's based today. We still have the House and the Senate. The House is still based on population, and the Senate is still based on equal representation.